Colton had ridden this desert trail 100 times in his life, maybe more. But that late afternoon felt strangely different. The sky was turning gold behind him, the kind of warm color that made the world look peaceful even when it wasn't. His horse walked slow, tired after a long day of moving cattle, and the wind pushed the dust across the dry ground in small waves. Colton didn't expect to find anything unusual out there. Nothing ever changed in this part of the desert. The cactus grew the same. The sand moved the same. The old rocks stood in the same position, year after year. Still, something tugged at the back of his mind, something small but steady, like a whisper telling him to keep watching the land carefully. At first, he didn't see anything at all. The desert stretched out wide and empty, only a few bushes here and there. But then, far off, he noticed a single spot of color that didn't belong. It was faint, something pale against the green of a barrel cactus. He narrowed his eyes, slowing the horse even more. From a distance, it looked like cloth, maybe a blanket or a piece of clothing. People sometimes dropped things when traveling across the land. But the closer he came, the more he realized it wasn't a lost cloth. Something was attached to the cactus. Something shaped like a person. Colton felt his stomach tighten. He gently kicked his horse, making it move faster. He wasn't sure what he would find, but he prayed silently. It wasn't something terrible. As he came near, he finally saw the truth. It was a young woman tied to the cactus, her hands secured behind her back with rough rope. Her head was down, resting lightly against her shoulder, as if she had been too tired to hold it up. The wind moved her hair softly, showing she was still alive. Colton stopped his horse a few steps away, unsure how close he should come at first. He didn't want to startle her. The scene itself was upsetting, but her condition wasn't violent. She looked more exhausted than anything else, like someone who had been standing for too long under the harsh sun. There was a wooden sign hanging from her neck by a thin string. The letters were dark and faded, but he could read most of them. Traitor. The last word had been burned away, leaving only a black mark. He wondered who put it there, and why. The woman lifted her head slowly when she noticed the sound of hooves. Her eyes opened just a little. They were soft, brown, and full of tired fear. She didn't even look surprised to see him. It was almost like she had expected someone to come but didn't know who it would be. Colton stepped down from his horse, keeping his movements slow and gentle. He didn't want her to think he meant her any harm. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm not here to trouble you. I just want to help." She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper, too weak to understand. She shook her head slightly, as if warning him not to step closer. Colton stopped where he was, giving her space. The desert wind carried a soft sound, her breathing, uneven but steady. She blinked slowly, her eyes trying to stay open. He could see she had been out in the sun for too long, but she didn't look hurt, just tired, stranded, and frightened. Her clothes were simple, and her hair was dark and braided loosely. She looked young, maybe early 20s. Her skin was warm-toned, and her features showed she was native, maybe from one of the nearby communities. Her expression told him she had been waiting not for help, but for something else. Something she feared. Colton took off his hat and crouched down slightly, keeping his distance. "I don't know what happened," he said gently, "but no one should be left out here like this." She swallowed, her lips dry. He reached into his saddlebag for his canteen and slowly held it out in front of him so she could see it clearly. "Just water," he said. "If you're thirsty, I can give you some." For a moment, she didn't move at all. Then, with a slow nod, she accepted his help. He carefully stepped closer and lifted the canteen to her lips, letting her drink a small amount. She took it gently, almost cautiously, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed. After a few sips, she closed her eyes and whispered something too faint to catch. "What was that?" he asked softly. She opened her eyes again. This time her voice was clearer, though still weak. Colton frowned. "Why not?" "They didn't leave me here by mistake," she whispered. "They want me to stay. Until—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Her meaning was simple. Whoever left her there wanted her to remain unseen, untouched, forgotten. Colton looked at the sign again. The burned-off final word bothered him. Someone didn't want it read. Someone wanted mystery around her situation. But whatever this was, he knew one thing: she hadn't done anything wrong that he could see. She looked more like someone caught in something she didn't understand. He gently touched the rope, checking how tight it was. She tried to pull away. Not because she didn't want to be free, but because she was afraid. "Please," she said softly. "You don't know who's watching." Colton looked around the wide desert. There was no one in sight. No horses. No people. Nothing. "I don't see anyone," he said. "They don't need to be close," she whispered. "If they find out you helped me, they'll come for you too." The way she said it wasn't threatening. It was worried, almost protective. She didn't want him in danger because of her. But Colton wasn't the kind of man who walked away from someone who needed help. It wasn't in his nature. Leaving her there wasn't a choice he could accept. "I'm not leaving you here," he said firmly, but still with kindness in his voice. "You've been in the sun too long. You need rest, water, and shade." She stared at him, confused. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. Maybe ever. Her shoulders lowered slightly, the tension in her body softening. It was like she finally allowed herself to believe someone wasn't trying to harm her. Colton took out his pocket knife and carefully cut the rope. He made sure not to hurt her or rush. She winced slightly from stiffness, not pain, and he helped her step away from the cactus slowly. Her legs trembled, and she almost fell, but he caught her gently by the arm. "It's all right," he said. "Lean on me if you need to." She looked embarrassed but allowed it. Her steps were small and unsteady, but she didn't resist when he guided her toward his horse. He lifted her carefully into the saddle, making sure she was comfortable before climbing up behind her. She held onto the horn of the saddle weakly, still unsure. He started riding toward his cabin, which was miles away but safe and hidden from the main roads. She didn't talk for a long time. 9 milesy. The rhythm of the horse and the cool air of the approaching evening helped her relax little by little. Her breathing evened out, and she looked less frightened. After some time, she finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have helped me." Colton smiled gently at the path ahead. "Maybe not," he said, "but sometimes doing the right thing is more important than staying out of trouble." She looked at him with surprise. No one had said words like that to her in a long time. She turned away again, staring at the desert passing by them. The golden sky, the soft wind, the quiet of the land. It all felt different now. Not safe, exactly, but no longer hopeless. After another few minutes, she asked, "Why did you stop?" Colton didn't hesitate. "Because I didn't see a traitor," he said simply. "I saw someone scared. Someone who needed help." "Oh." Her eyes softened, touched by those words in a way she didn't know how to explain. No stranger had ever spoken to her like that. With kindness and understanding instead of judgment. She lowered her head slowly, whispering something to herself too soft for him to hear. But she felt something shift inside her. Something she thought she had lost. Hope. And as the desert grew cooler behind them, she realized that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't ending on that cactus after all. Maybe it was only beginning. Colton's cabin stood on a quiet rise above a dry creek, far from town and far from any roads people used regularly. By the time he reached it, The sun had almost disappeared behind the hills. A cool breeze swept across the land, bringing the first shade of night. The woman, Senna, though he didn't know her name yet, had fallen asleep against him, worn out from the heat and the long hours tied to the cactus. She didn't stir until the horse stopped in front of the cabin. Colton slid off first and carefully lifted her down. Her eyes opened slightly, still foggy with exhaustion. She looked around, confused, as if she didn't know where she was or how she got there. But her expression softened a little when she saw the small cabin instead of a group of angry men or a familiar harsh place. "You're safe here," Colton said quietly. "No one comes around this way." She didn't answer right away, but she nodded weakly, trusting his words more than she expected to trust a stranger. He guided her toward the door and pushed it open, revealing the warm glow of a lantern inside. The room was simple: a bed in the corner, a small table, a few chairs, shelves with basic supplies. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, and it felt safe compared to the open desert. Colton brought her to the bed and helped her sit down. She leaned back, breathing gently, her body still recovering from the long hours under the sun. He handed her his canteen again, letting her take a few slow sips. She drank with more strength this time. Like her body finally understood, it wasn't in danger anymore. "You can rest here," he said. "I'll make you something warm to eat." She looked at him with a mixture of confusion and disbelief, as if kindness was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her voice was still soft and shaky when she spoke. "You don't have to do all this," she whispered. Colton smiled a little. "Maybe not," he said, "but I want to. You look like you've been through enough." A faint emotion crossed her face. Something close to gratitude, but also sadness. She looked down at her hands, noticing the rope marks on her wrists. She touched them softly, not because they hurt, but because she couldn't believe she was finally free from them. While she rested, Colton set a small pot on the stove and warmed up a simple meal: beans, a bit of cornbread he had left, and a small portion of dried meat softened in water. It wasn't a feast, but it was warm and filling. When the food was ready, he placed the bowl near her. She hesitated for a moment, almost shy, but then she took it with both hands and ate slowly. She hadn't eaten properly in a long time, but she didn't rush. Every bite seemed to bring more life back into her face. After a few minutes, she looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered, this time with more strength. I didn't think anyone would help me." Colton sat on the chair across from her, resting his hands on his knees. He wasn't a talkative man by nature, but the silence between them felt peaceful, not awkward. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said softly. "Not until you're ready." She nodded, grateful that he didn't push her. The night grew deeper, and the sound of crickets filled the quiet space outside. The lantern light flickered gently, warming the wooden walls. Senna put the bowl aside, her eyes drifting around the room, taking everything in. The tools on the shelves, the hat hanging near the door, the folded blankets stacked neatly. "You live alone?" she asked softly. "Most of the time," Colton said. "Been that way for years. This cabin's quiet, and I like it that way." She nodded again. The quiet seemed comfortable to her too. After a long pause, she sighed, as if gathering courage to speak. "My name," she started softly, "is Senna." Colton nodded gently. "Nice to meet you, Senna." She took a slow breath, her voice trembling slightly. Colton leaned back in the chair. "I'll listen," he said. "Start wherever you want." Senna looked down at her hands again before speaking. "I'm from the cliffs near the canyon," she said quietly. "A small community. Not many people. Everyone knows everyone. I lived with my mother and little sister. I worked with the elders during the dry seasons, helping carry supplies from the traders." She paused, swallowing as if the next part was harder to say. "During the last drought, our supplies went missing," she continued. Food, blankets, medicine, everything we needed to get through the worst months. She shook her head gently. At first, everyone thought the traders cheated us. But I saw someone taking the supplies before they disappeared. Colton listened carefully, not interrupting. It was Rokan, she whispered. He was one of our leaders. He wanted more power. He wanted to control the trade. All of it. When I saw him moving the supplies into the old mine, I went to the elders to tell them. Her voice broke a little. But Rokan told them I was lying. He said I was trying to turn people against him. He said I wanted his position. Close 1. Colton's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't know Rokan, but he knew enough about people to understand how easy it was for someone powerful to twist the truth. Did the elders believe him? He asked quietly. Senna nodded slowly. They believed every word. They said I was trying to cause trouble. They said I was trying to make our community weak. She closed her eyes, her voice trembling. My own family didn't believe me. They didn't even ask me to explain. Colton felt something heavy settle in his chest, not anger, but sadness for her. He couldn't imagine how painful that must have been. What happened then? He asked gently. Senna took a shaky breath. Rokan said, I needed to be taught a lesson. Not anything painful. She shook her head quickly. Nothing like that. Just something that would scare others from listening to me again. Her eyes lowered. So they tied me to the cactus. Not to harm me, but to shame me. To make others think I was a liar. To make me want to confess to something I didn't do. Colton nodded slowly. The situation was cruel, but she hadn't been harmed. It was more emotional than physical humiliation. Fear. Loneliness. And the sign? He asked. Senna touched the place on her chest where the sign had hung. Rokan wrote it, she whispered. It said traitor last of the liars. But someone burned off the last word. I don't know who. Maybe someone who felt sorry for me. Maybe someone who didn't agree. Quote, Why not just talk to you? Colton asked gently. Senna gave a sad smile. Because Rokan speaks loudly, and people listen to loud voices. I'm quiet. I always have been. Quiet people don't get heard. Colton's eyes softened. He understood that too well. He had lived his whole life in the quiet. He knew how easy it was to be overlooked. How long were you out there? He asked. Senna looked away. Since morning, she said. They tied me there at sunrise. She paused. I thought maybe I should stay. Maybe it was better if I disappeared quietly. Colton shook his head gently. No one deserves to disappear, he said softly. Senna looked at him for a long moment. In her eyes he saw something new, a tiny spark of hope she tried to hide. She spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Colton answered simply, without thinking. I saw you were alone, and scared, and no one deserves to face the desert alone. Senna's eyes softened, the tension in her shoulders easing a little. It was the first time since he met her that she looked like she believed someone cared. Outside, the wind grew colder. Colton got up and placed another log on the small stove, warming the room. Senna watched him quietly. She wasn't used to people showing concern, especially strangers. You can sleep now, Colton said gently. You need rest. I'll keep watch for a while. Senna hesitated, then lay down slowly, pulling the blanket over herself. Thank you, she whispered again. This time, her voice was stronger. Colton sat by the stove, listening to her breathing soften as she fell asleep. The cabin was quiet, peaceful, warm. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring or who might come looking, but he knew one thing for certain. He had seen something in her that no one else had bothered to see. She wasn't a traitor. She wasn't a liar. She was someone who needed a voice, and for the first time, Someone was willing to listen. And as she slept, safe for the first time in days, Colton understood that helping her had been the right choice no matter the danger, no matter the trouble that might come. He would face whatever came next, because she wasn't alone anymore. The morning light touched the cabin softly, slipping through the small window and landing across the wooden floor. Colton had spent most of the night awake, listening to every sound outside, keeping the lantern dim, making sure no one had followed them. The desert was quiet, but the kind of quiet that made a person listen harder. He didn't want Senna to worry, so he kept calm, kept steady. That was the kind of man he was, someone who believed that protecting peace meant staying alert. Senna woke slowly, her eyes blinking against the faint sunlight. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Her breath caught in her chest, her body tightening in fear. But when she saw Colton sitting near the stove with a mug of warm tea in his hands, her entire expression softened. She exhaled quietly, like a small weight had lifted off her. "You slept long," Colton said with a gentle smile. "You needed it." Senna sat up carefully, still feeling the stiffness in her muscles. But the pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was the kind of soreness that came from exhaustion, not harm. She rubbed her wrists again. The marks faded, but still visible. "I haven't slept in a real bed for days," she whispered. "I almost forgot what it felt like." Colton poured her some warm tea and handed her the mug. She wrapped her hands around it, enjoying the heat. The smell of simple herbs filled the room, calming and soft. "Did anyone come?" she asked quietly. "No," Colton said. "Not yet. But I saw tracks earlier. Someone's looking." Senna's eyes widened slightly. She lowered her mug and stared at the table. "They won't give up," she whispered. "Not if Rokan thinks I know something." Colton watched her closely. She had courage, but fear lived beneath it. The kind that came from being betrayed by everyone she trusted. He wanted to tell her she was safe now, but he knew he couldn't promise something like that. Not when he didn't know how far Rokan's reach extended. He finally spoke, keeping his voice calm. "Tell me what else you know." "Reese." Senna hesitated. She looked at him with uncertainty, wondering if he truly meant it. People had asked her to explain before, but none of them listened. They wanted her to admit to something she never did. But Colton asked differently, not like someone expecting a lie, but like someone willing to hear the truth. She took a slow breath. "I saw Rokan receiving small crates," she said softly. "Crates that were supposed to belong to the whole community. But he didn't take them to the storage house. He moved them himself into the old mine." Her hands tightened around the mug. "When I told the elders, Rokan said I was trying to make him look bad, and they believed him." Colton nodded, absorbing every detail. "Why would he steal supplies?" "Because he wanted control," Senna whispered. "If he controlled the trade, he controlled everything. Especially during a drought. People would depend on him. They would fear saying no to him." She shook her head gently. "I wasn't supposed to hear anything. I was just in the wrong place." Colton leaned back slightly. "Why didn't anyone else speak up?" "Because they didn't see what I saw," she said. "And Rokan always speaks with confidence. People follow voices that sound strong, not quiet ones." She lowered her gaze, embarrassed by her own words. "I tried to tell them. I tried so hard." "I know," Colton said gently. "I believe you." Senna looked up at him, her eyes softening with something like relief. No one had ever said those words to her, not with sincerity. And something inside her finally loosened. A knot that had been tied for months. Before she could speak again, Colton stood up and walked to the door. He opened it just enough to look outside, without letting too much light in. The land was still quiet, but he saw faint hoofprints near the creek, fresh ones. "They're circling," he said quietly, staying just far enough away to watch. Senna felt her heart tighten. "We should leave," she whispered. "I don't want them to find me here. I don't want anything to happen to you." Colton turned toward her. "Nothing's going to happen to me," he said firmly. "And I'm not letting anyone take you." She swallowed hard, moved by his certainty. She had never known someone who stood beside her, without asking for something in return. Colton stepped away from the door and sat down across from her. "We need proof," he said. "Something that shows you were telling the truth all along." Senna stared at him quietly. "The crates," she whispered. "They're still in the mine." "You're sure?" Colton asked. "Yes," she said. "Rokan hid them in the lower tunnels. He thought no one would look there." Colton took a deep breath. He knew the old mine. Everyone did. It was dangerous and half collapsed, but still reachable. If what Senna said was true, the mine could clear her name and expose Rokan. "It's risky," he said. "If anyone sees us, they'll think we're running from something," Senna finished. "I know." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "But I can't hide forever. I can't let him keep lying. Not after everything he's done." Colton studied her for a moment. She was afraid, very afraid, but she wasn't broken. She still had strength inside her, even if she didn't realize it. "We'll go tonight," he said finally. Senna's breath caught. "Tonight? It's the best time," Colton said. "Less chance of being seen." Senna nodded slowly. Fear and relief mixed inside her. She was grateful she wouldn't face the journey alone. She didn't know why he cared so much, but she felt something calm in his presence. A steadiness she hadn't experienced in years. The rest of the day passed quietly. Colton packed small supplies, water, rope, a lantern, and a cloth to cover the lantern's light. Senna helped where she could, still moving slowly from exhaustion, but determined. Every step made her feel stronger, like she was reclaiming something she lost. In the afternoon, while Colton checked the saddles, Senna stood at the window, watching the desert. She saw two riders far off near the distant ridge. They didn't come close, but they stayed long enough to confirm her fear. They were searching. "Do you think they know I'm here?" she whispered when Colton joined her. "They suspect," he said. "But they don't have proof. And I'm not giving them any." Senna's voice trembled slightly. "They won't stop." Colton placed a steady hand on the windowsill. "Neither will we." As the sun dropped behind the hills, painting the sky with deep orange and purple hues, they prepared to leave. Senna hesitated at the door, taking one long breath before stepping outside. The night air was cool and refreshing. She pulled Colton's spare coat around her shoulders, feeling protected. They rode quietly, keeping to the narrow paths between tall brush and rocky outcrops. The moon was only a thin slice, giving them darkness as their cover. Senna held onto the saddle horn carefully, her eyes scanning the land for any sign of movement. After nearly an hour, they reached the entrance of the old mine, a wide crack in the cliffs, partly covered in shadow. Senna felt a chill run through her. She hadn't been near the place since the day she discovered Rokan's secret. "You ready?" Colton asked softly. She nodded, even though her heart was pounding. "Yes, I want this to end." They dismounted and tied the horses under a rocky overhang. Colton lit the lantern, keeping its flame low. Senna led him down the narrow passage, her voice barely a whisper as she guided him through turns and dips. "It's deeper inside," she said. "Just ahead." The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, and Senna pointed toward a cluster of dark crates stacked behind fallen rocks. "There," she whispered. Colton stepped forward, lifting the covered lantern to see better. The crates were dusty, but the marks on them were clear symbols from Senna's community. And on the side of one crate, half hidden under a cloth, was the seal belonging to Rokan. Senna exhaled softly, a rush of emotions flooding her chest. Fear, relief, sadness, and hope, all tangled together. The proof was real. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't been wrong. Before she could say another word, Footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. Senna froze. Colton turned quickly, lowering the lantern. Voices approached. More than one. Calm. Steady. Confident. And Senna recognized one of them instantly. Rokan had found them. Her breath caught, but she didn't run. She didn't hide. Instead, she stood straighter, her trembling fading, replaced by something stronger. Colton stepped slightly in front of her, ready to shield her, but she touched his arm gently. "No," she whispered. "I have to speak. I have to finish this." And for the first time, Colton saw something different in her courage she didn't know she possessed. Part 4 would continue this moment. The sound of footsteps echoed deeper into the mine, slow but steady, each one growing clearer as they approached. Senna felt her breath tighten in her chest, but she didn't step back. She didn't hide behind Colton like she would have only a day before. Something inside her had shifted the moment she saw the crates again. Seeing the truth with her own eyes lit a small fire inside her, not anger, but purpose. Colton stood slightly in front of her, not blocking her, but ready if she needed him. He held the lantern low, keeping the light from shining directly down the tunnel. Both of them listened as the voices became clearer. One voice in particular made Senna's hands tremble. Rokan, the man who had taken everything from her, her peace, her voice, her trust, walked with calm confidence, as if he owned the ground beneath his feet. She recognized the sound of his footsteps almost as easily as his voice. He always walked like someone who believed no one would ever challenge him. The lantern's dim glow swept across the rock wall just as 3 figures appeared in the tunnel's entrance. The first was Rokan, tall, sharply dressed for someone riding through the desert. Behind him came 2 men she recognized from the community, Kiro and Jalen, both quiet, loyal, the kind that followed orders rather than questioned them. Rokan's eyes adjusted to the faint light, and he spotted Colton and Senna standing near the crates. His expression didn't show surprise. It didn't show anger either. Instead, he smiled, slow and composed. "I wondered where you'd gone," he said calmly. His voice echoed in the chamber. "The desert told me someone found you." Senna felt her heart thump, but she kept her eyes on him. Colton didn't move. "We're just talking," he said, keeping his tone neutral. Rokan's gaze shifted to the lantern, then to the crates behind them. He studied the scene for a long moment before speaking. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, not as a threat, but like a disappointed teacher scolding a child. Senna took a step forward before Colton could stop her. "I had every right to come here," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "These crates belong to our people. They were never yours to hide." Rokan's smile faded slightly, replaced by a sharp, cold focus. "You misunderstood what you saw," he said. "I was doing what I had to do to protect our community." "You were stealing," Senna said, "and blaming me for it." Kiro and Jalen exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the story they had heard. They had been told Senna lied, that she made accusations without proof. Now, seeing the crates themselves and Senna standing tall, speaking clearly, they looked unsure. Rokan noticed their hesitation. His tone hardened. "These supplies were set aside for emergencies," he said, raising his voice just enough to sound confident. "You don't know everything. You never did." Senna shook her head. "I know enough," she said quietly. "I know you hid the crates. I know you wanted control. I know you made everyone believe I was a liar so no one would question you." Colton watched silently, letting her speak. He sensed this was her moment, something she needed to finish herself. Rokan stepped forward, his face tightening. "You don't know what you're saying," he said. "You're confused, dizzy from the sun. You were always too emotional." Senna's jaw tightened. His words, once so powerful against her, no longer broke her down. She looked at him steadily. "I'm not confused," she said. Rokan's eyes narrowed. You think anyone will believe you? After everything? After what the elders decided? Senna took a slow breath. They'll believe what they see. She gestured toward the crates behind her. This is the truth. And it was here, all along. Rokan's face changed very slightly, but enough that Colton saw it. A crack in his confidence. He hadn't expected her to stand firm. He hadn't expected her to find strength after being cast out. Colton stepped forward now, his voice even and calm. Rokan turned his gaze to Colton, studying him like someone assessing a problem he hadn't planned for. You're interfering in something you don't understand, Rokan said. This is our community's matter. You don't belong in it. Maybe not, Colton said. But right is right. Wrong is wrong. And lies don't change that. Jalen shifted his weight, uncomfortable. He looked at Senna, then at the crates, then at Rokan. Is it true? He asked softly. Were these hidden here? Rokan shot him a sharp look, but Senna answered before he could. Yes, she said. I saw it with my own eyes. And now you see it too. Jalen glanced back at Rokan again, searching for something, an explanation, a justification. But Rokan offered none. He remained silent, jaw clenched. Kiro spoke next, his voice uneasy. Rokan, why didn't you tell us? Rokan straightened his shoulders. Because you wouldn't understand, he said. I did what I had to do. Axis. Senna stepped closer. You did what helped you, she said softly. Not us. Her voice didn't shake this time. It was calm, steady, filled with a quiet certainty that made Rokan's expression tremble with restrained frustration. For a long moment, no one spoke. The mind felt still, the air thick with unspoken truth. Finally, Rokan spoke again, lowering his voice. If you leave now, I can forget this happened. I can explain everything to the elders. We can make this go away. Senna shook her head slowly. I won't be blamed for what you did. Rokan took a step toward her, but Colton moved instantly, placing himself between them. He didn't raise his voice or make any threatening motion. He simply stood there, firm as a stone wall. That's close enough, Colton said quietly. Rokan stopped, eyes narrowing in irritation. But he could see it, Colton wasn't going to move. Senna stepped out from behind Colton, surprising both men. She stood beside him, drawing her strength from his steady presence. She faced Rokan directly. You can say whatever you want, she said, but the truth is right here. And I won't run from it. Her calmness stunned him. This wasn't the frightened girl he humiliated before. This wasn't the quiet voice he silenced. This was someone who had finally reclaimed her own strength. Kiro took a slow breath, then spoke softly. We need to bring the elders here, he said. They need to see this. Rokan shot him a sharp, warning stare, but Kiro didn't look away. For the first time, someone stood against him. Jalen nodded in agreement. Senna exhaled. A mixture of relief and fear washing through her. She never wanted Rokan to be hurt. She never wanted revenge. She only wanted to be heard, to be believed. Colton rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. You did it, he whispered. You stood up. Her eyes filled with quiet emotion. I didn't do it alone. The air shifted. Something heavy and dark that had hovered over her for months lifted, replaced by a lightness she almost didn't recognize. Hope. Rokan realized he had lost. Not because of force, not because of anger, but because someone finally told the truth with courage he had never expected. He turned away, jaw tight, saying nothing as he walked toward the tunnel exit. Kiro and Jalen followed, but not like men following a leader, more like men who needed answers. Colton and Senna watched them leave. When the footsteps faded into silence, Senna let out a long breath she had been holding since the day she was tied to that cactus. "It's over," she whispered. Colton shook his head gently. "It's just beginning." His voice held no fear, only calm understanding. "But this time, you won't face it alone." Senna looked at him, her eyes shining softly. She had been cast out, misunderstood, silenced. But this stranger, this quiet rancher who saw her as more than a sign around her neck, had given her something she thought she'd lost forever. A chance. A voice. A future. She stepped forward and whispered, "Why did you help me?" "Really?" Colton looked at her the same way he had looked when he found her in the desert, steady, gentle, without judgment. "Because you weren't waiting to fade away," he said softly. "You were waiting for someone to see who you really are." Her breath trembled, but her smile grew slowly, filled with warmth and gratitude. Together they walked out of the mine, stepping into the soft glow of the early dawn. The desert stretched wide before them, no longer a place of fear, but a place of possibilities. Senna wasn't a traitor. She wasn't the last of anything. She was the beginning of a new story. And she didn't have to walk it alone.